Energy is something that must be changed or transferred in order to do something. There are many different ways that energy can be stored or transferred. For example, kinetic energy is the energy in movement. The unit for measuring the amount of energy is called the joule, J. You need about to walk up the stairs between 2 floors in a building. The movement is taking the people higher, so kinetic energy is being changed to gravitational potential energy. Energy changes are not always helpful. Typhoons, hurricanes, earthquakes, and tsunamis are some examples of how energy changes can be very dangerous. You can represent the processes as arrows and draw diagrams to show changes in energy. Here are some other examples. A fire that burns wood changes chemical energy to thermal energy. A television converts electrical energy to sound and light. In natural gas, energy stores and transfers. There are many different ways in which energy is being stored or transferred around you all the time. Energy can be stored more easily in some ways than in others. For example, you can keep uncooked rice for a long time. That is a store of chemical energy. Coal and crude oil are stores of chemical energy that formed millions of years ago. This shows that some energy stores can last for a very long time. A battery is another example of how chemical energy can be stored. It is quite easy to store chemical energy. The gas is burned, which changes chemical energy to thermal energy. Gravitational potential energy is also easy to store. The picture shows a tank containing water. A pump has been used to lift up the water. The water stores gravitational potential energy. The tennis ball has a store of kinetic energy while it is moving. Some energy stores only last for a short time. Thermal energy, heat, is one example. Hot objects will eventually cool down. They will lose their store of thermal energy. Kinetic energy is another example. Kinetic energy is more difficult than chemical or gravitational potential energy to store. The tennis ball in the picture has a store of kinetic energy while the ball is moving, but the ball will eventually stop moving. In all these examples, there is a process or event that changes or transfers the energy. For example, burning is a process. Energy can be stored more easily in some ways than in others. The unit for measuring the amount of energy is called the joule, J. There are many different ways in which energy is being stored or transferred around you all the time. The electrical energy is then transferred through wires into homes and buildings transferred around you all the time. The electrical energy is then transferred through wires into homes and buildings. Energy is something that must be changed or transferred in order to do something.
What is kinetic energy? Energy in motion. Stored energy. Heat energy. Chemical energy. What unit measures energy? Watt, joule, Newton, volt. What is stored in a battery? Kinetic energy. Chemical energy. Thermal energy. Gravitational energy. What energy does coal store? Thermal energy. Chemical energy. Kinetic energy. Electrical energy. What happens to hot objects over time? Gain energy. Cool down. Stay hot. Stay hot. explode. What energy is in moving water? Chemical energy, kinetic energy, thermal energy, potential energy. What is gravitational potential energy? Energy in motion. Stored energy due to height. Heat energy. Chemical energy. What energy does a tennis ball have when moving? Chemical energy. Kinetic energy. Thermal energy. Potential energy. What is an example of a long-term energy store? Thermal energy, chemical energy, kinetic energy, sound energy. What is an example of a short-term energy store? Chemical energy, thermal energy, gravitational energy, nuclear energy. What energy is difficult to store? Chemical energy, kinetic energy, potential energy, nuclear energy. What energy does uncooked rice store? Thermal energy, chemical energy, kinetic energy, potential energy. What energy does a pump give to water? Thermal energy, gravitational energy, kinetic energy, chemical energy. What happens to kinetic energy over time? Increases, decreases, stays constant, explodes. What happens to kinetic energy over time? Increases, decreases, stays constant, explodes. What energy is in crude oil? Thermal energy, chemical energy, kinetic energy, potential energy. What energy is in a moving tennis ball? Chemical energy, kinetic energy, thermal energy, potential energy. What energy is easy to store? Kinetic energy, chemical energy, thermal energy, sound energy. What energy does a tank of water store? Thermal energy, gravitational energy, kinetic energy, chemical energy. What energy is in a battery? Thermal energy, chemical energy, kinetic energy, potential energy. What energy is in coal? Thermal energy, chemical energy, kinetic energy, potential energy.